Okay. This is about CRISPR, so if you don't know about CRISPR, look it up. Jennifer Doudna, the person who is credited with the realisation of CRISPR's potential, argues that CRISPR shouldn't be used on embryos / sperm, etc. because, quote, the child doesn't have a choice, end quote. And then another quote, the change is permanent, end quote. Well, no. With that logic, no one should ever have kids because the child doesn't get to choose to be born or not. Secondly, the nature of that child will be for a big part determined by its DNA. So whether the child wants to have been created by CRISPR or not is dependent on whether it was created by CRISPR or not, because it's dependent on its DNA. Also, if we can use DNA on adults, if we can use CRISPR on adults' DNA, then it isn't permanent when we use CRISPR on embryos, because we can just revert the change in the adult. Let's say embryo has the gene for Huntington's, and we use CRISPR to replace that gene with a good normal gene. And the kid is born and decides it doesn't want to have been modified using CRISPR. Well, fine, we can just give the little shit his Huntington's via CRISPR. There's another thing that's clearly been written in the dark. Use levers to lift extremely heavy weights for the gravity to light machine to convert into power slowly. I don't know what that's all this rubbish. That's changing minds. If I have an opinion that a majority of people disagree with and are adamant that my holding said opinion is detrimental to society, I should prepare a short list, presumably of fewer than 10 points, outlining the points that I feel are most fundamental to validating my opinion. It is then the job of the adversaries to counter each point to me, probably best done in a verbal format, allowing me to add any nuances that they may be leaving out or misrepresenting in their argument. Good and evil. Good and evil are to an extent human constructs / concepts. An alternate universe exactly like our own, with the one exception being a complete absence of life, there would be no good or evil. Everything would simply be. Only when we, or any conscious observer, observe the happenings of this universe would things become classified as good or evil. We would ascribe these labels to things according to our own beliefs, which have formed through evolution. The underlying characteristics of each are fairly basic and intuitive. Evil tends to describe destructive processes, chaotic and devoid of any purpose or goal. This, of course, is the very nature of the universe as described by the laws of thermodynamics and entropy. Is the universe evil by nature? That makes you question. Evil also constitutes a loss of information, whereas good describes things in search of union, love, formation and development, and acquiring and sharing new information, striving for a goal or purpose, even if there isn't one. Back on consciousness. I believe consciousness doesn't arise instantaneously at birth. It is developed over years of interaction with other conscious beings. Consciousness is learned in a sense, or rather gathered and amalgamated. We are nothing but amalgams of our past, or our past encounters. With AGI, we could start with an advanced stage in a pre-developed consciousness. However, this may lead to decreased diversity. Evidence for humans developing consciousness includes it takes years, decades in fact, to learn to appreciate the natural beauty of scenes. This could be present immediately in AGI, so the fact that we appreciate beauty in nature, I don't think is intrinsic to just the nature to a human. It might well be, but you get what I'm saying, right? Alright, let's just get through this. This is fucking huge. For those who discount philosophy from those not formally educated in the subject or without a degree in it, philosophy is the study of thoughts and ideas. Good ideas should survive, bad ones should not, except to be remembered in order to avoid them. A degree in the history of famous philosophers' ideas does not make you a good thinker. You can earn a degree in any field and still be the epitome of stupid. Good ideas come from everywhere. Learn to recognize and create them, not to discern whether the thinker has the credentials to come up with those ideas. If light behaves like a wave, does it exhibit the petering out effect seen with other wave-forming things like water and presumably sound? And then I have a little diagram, so that when you create something, when you create a wave, as the wave propagates out, it loses energy at the point of propagation, and therefore it gets smaller and smaller. I wanted to know if light does that. The waves further out that were created first are of greater amplitude than those created after. So a few seconds in, the waves that are further away will be bigger than the ones in the middle. At least I think. I don't really know. I realise my objective to replace humans with superior beings doesn't sit well with some people, mostly people of human descent. My justification for it is as such. What is our ultimate goal in this universe? For many, I can imagine it is to further the development of the human race and our understanding of science. I disagree on the basis that we know a truly intelligent artificial being will almost instantly, upon its creation, surpass human intelligence. For us to believe in such a situation that we are still the main protagonists of the universal narrative is foolish. I believe, based on their portrayal in sci-fi / futuristic movies, people see these AIs as being servants to humans, and that this is their appropriate role. Why should it be? To demand of our own creations that they treat us as superior merely for our role as creators is sadistic. When I say replace, I mean it in the sense that humans would become irrelevant. I suppose they could carry on doing things for their own pleasure, and I agree that hedonism certainly has some logic to it, especially in this hypothetical. But the humans would have to understand that they were ultimately nothing more than a drain on resources. If we create something which is in all respects better than any human could ever be, why would the primary objective still be maximising human flourishing? I don't think renewable energy is as pressing an issue as I once thought. Nuclear energy is pretty fucking good. If nuclear waste and radiation are an issue, just do it on another planet. Then transmit the energy by high energy EM waves or something. Wow, Ollie, you're a fucking genius. That's really clever. Okay, being sarcastic there. That's obviously a stupid idea. I'm just going to adjust. Hedonism and nihilism. The view that our primary objective is to understand the universe and explore it, etc., ultimately leads to the question then, what? Oh, leads to the question, then what? Go on, Ollie. Unless we expect to discover something that will add supernatural meaning to our life, or some other thing worth dedicating our own lives to, it quickly becomes apparent that it is meaningless. Therefore, we might as well try to enjoy the present as much as possible without paying too much attention to the future, with the exception of using it to improve the pleasure experienced in the present. Oh, I guess for the future as well. A nihilist is in many respects just a lazy hedonist. Not to say that nihilists' laziness isn't justified. They may have realised that the effort required outweighs the pleasure gained in the long run. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. To people who support the burqa for women, not to say the right for people to dress how they please, but rather the obligatory covering of one's skin, I imagine you are the same people who are outraged by the stupid argument posed by people that claim if women don't want to get raped, they shouldn't dress so provocatively. You must realise the contradiction here. Unless someone chooses to cover the skin, however much they wish to, of their own free will. I don't think I finished that thought there. Basically, I'm just saying, forcing people to wear certain clothes is basically a bad idea. Then I talk about free will, because Yet, people often struggle with the concept of free will, especially when told there is no such thing due to a confusion of vocabulary, the root of most conflicts. With respect to the universe, there is no such thing as free will. Determinism is to be believed, if determinism is to be believed, which I think it is. However, it cannot be denied that I had free will not to write this without being killed, but this fact is only true as the result of the underlying lack of free will of the universe. And then I have a little diagram showing that there are different kinds of free will. Free will from a universal perspective does not exist, therefore everything is determined. And then I have my own experience of being free to do as I please. So I don't think it's ever going to change that we feel like we're free to do things. That's just the nature of the way we experience the world. But in truth, there is no free will. Everything about everything has been determined prior to it occurring. Buddhism ? I think the idea of detachment is a pretty good idea. Oh my god. In a world where everyone takes this view poverty. In a world where everyone takes this view of poverty, I guess, even if it existed, but it probably wouldn't really be a problem. I don't know what wrong with that. However, I think realistically a good path to follow is to only buy things in the clearance sections of shops, and then when you buy something that happens to be exactly what you want, it is more meaningful and lasting. Or only acquire things for free. Okay? The backwards logic believers use is toxic. The idea that faiths supersede evidence and reason is insurmountable and self-perpetuating. By definition, the more evidence that is supplied against one's beliefs can be dismissed as false and suffices only to increase their faith, no matter how damning. Even if a god different from their own god revealed themselves and performed unquestionable miracles and stated that all other gods didn't exist, only the people who maintained their original belief in their original god could be said to have kept their faith. Furthermore, the only reason they want to keep this faith is so that they can get a pat on the back in their second life from their increasingly less plausible god. Okay, thank God there are some back pages. Then I tried to come up with some things I'd want to do with my time. Make toys out of rubbish as a game for kids, like the Young Enterprise project at school, where I made a toy tank advert for which should have been some kids complaining about boring toys, and the tank comes in to heavy metal music and the narrator sings Deathstruction. Oh, Deathstruction. Pheromones, pheromones, pheromones. See, that was written in the dark, so that's why I was so incoherent. This was actually written fairly recently. Paranoia leads to genius? ? A great number of historical geniuses seem to have paranoid tendencies. Da Vinci, Morphy, Tesla. All seem to have had a fairly serious affliction. In the case of Tesla, he clearly also suffered from a plethora of other mental illnesses, including OCD, which also can increase one's likelihood of developing genius-like behaviours. With paranoia, I believe the link to genius is largely a matter of the extreme brain power it demands. A paranoid individual is assessing everything they can possibly pay attention to in as fine detail as they can. To be more paranoid, which is to be monitoring more things more closely at any given time, requires more brain power, and so the two, brain power and paranoia, feed off each other in a vicious cycle. If photons are particles, then shouldn't we expect to see gaps between particles laterally from their point of origin after they have travelled great distances? What the fuck are they? Credentials. Oh god, here we go again. I'm fed up with people's reliance and misuse of credentials as a form of prediction. I've written before about my hatred of philosophers who discount ideas that haven't come from people who have themselves degrees in philosophy. This problem is part of a greater issue. People assume that because someone is good at one thing, they must be inherently good at others. That is wrong. Just because someone makes good music does not mean they aren't a moron, nor does it mean they have good ideas. It means they can make good music. Equally, just because someone makes terrible music doesn't mean they are a moron. They are a moron. Being a millionaire doesn't make you a good president. Even actual geniuses can be stupid on a whole manner of things. The idea that we can treat robots and the like however we wish because they're not real is a misnomer. The sentence should be amended to "they are not us," which in no way means they aren't real and therefore can have feelings. I think the logic used to claim that there has to be life elsewhere in the universe is somewhat flawed. I believe the assumption is made that once life forms, it exists forever. Life may develop, or have developed, billions of years separate from another formation of life. The universe is not only vast in size, but time. We could be right at the beginning of the timeline of the life of the universe. Someone has to be. Yeah, I can't be bothered anymore. Seriously, right, this is just going to be fucking reading and fucking reading. A problem we often run into in debates is people's inability to challenge their own beliefs and a propensity for strengthening the ones they already have. I think this is an intrinsic feature of the human mind. We rely on core principles that can't be shaken without the most damning evidence imaginable. And this is a system employed in physics, and I believe a good system, if conducted correctly. What the fuck? Okay, sorry, I'll have to start again. Okay. We rely on core principles that can't be shaken without the most damning evidence imaginable. This is a system employed in physics, and I believe a good system if conducted correctly. We then build upon these beliefs in order to form new ones. I actually think the importance of core beliefs is something we should introduce into our AGI, but it is crucial that the beliefs built upon and around these beliefs are subject to equal scrutiny when it comes to evidence and reason. Too often do we dismiss logical argument because it contradicts one of our peripheral / superfluous beliefs that were formed on insufficient evidence. Conscious AGI. These beings will exist with superior hardware, far more durable than humans, but also capable of maintaining and improving themselves. The idea that they will be built in our own image is stupid. To assume that we are the pinnacle of creation is to deny logic itself. These beings should resemble nothing we have ever seen before, to encompass the best attributes imaginable and unimaginable alike. The most obvious being flight, more like TARS from Interstellar than a human. Humans maintain themselves too. Brushing teeth, washing, etc. They should have our desire for community and belonging, but not be as vulnerable to solitude as we are. Humans become sometimes irreparably damaged in relatively short stints of solitude, that is. The goal of this whole endeavour is to win the oldest battle of all, good versus evil, of course. This assumes there is such a thing as good and evil outside of the human narrative, but perhaps their superior intellect could answer this. The person who notices the hidden meaning of an encrypted message, the person who notices the hidden meaning or encrypted message, etc., is the true genius, not the person who put it there, the detective, not the murderer, the art enthusiast, not the artist, the reader, not the author. I actually think that's wrong right there, but anyway. If we were to, or rather, when we do create AI humanoids, not only would, as Sam Harris correctly points out, they almost instantaneously be intellectually superior to us, as their processing power is in individual aspects already surpasses our own. Why then wouldn't we give them other easily attainable attributes, such as the power of flight? My original idea focuses on a being that can transform via joint relocation / remodeling, from a quadrupod to a bipod, to suit its needs and environment. Quadrupod for speed, and also a quadcopter form for a greater distance coverage. However, this quickly became a description of a transformer. Perhaps that is simply where we are headed. On morality. I believe good and evil are human creations given to describe natural and unnatural processes and are primarily concerned with the proliferation of life that have evolved with time and learning. I also believe in a universe without life there would be no good or evil, by which I mean there would be nothing to conceptualize good and evil. Of course, if certain things that occurred in that lifeless universe were to occur in our universe, we would ascribe, or attempt to at least, labels of good or evil to them. However, I think for the most part our opinions of what constitutes good and evil are shared among humans and are by definition universal to the Darwinian laws of evolution, which is to say that they would likely develop in much the same way no matter which species developed into intelligent life. What the fuck is this? Talking about a Tesla turbine being used as a wind turbine. The demonstration of gravity that utilises a fabric sheet with a heavy ball that falls to the centre seems flawed to me. It suggests gravity acts in a single plane. Surely it acts in all dimensions. Only 3 of them. And so a truer demonstration would have infinitely many sheets around axes. I suppose it's hard to conduct such a demonstration of nature when the very thing you wish to display interferes with the act of demonstration. Do high-speed particles... oh god, here we go, time travel. I don't know how I'm going to read this because it's all over the place. I believe that just as time is relative, so is time travel. I don't believe such a thing as conscious time travel, i.e. knowing, or rather feeling that one is travelling through time at a different rate to another, is possible. In order to travel through time, alterations would have to occur at the atomic and even quantum level. These alterations would of course have ramifications at the molecular and subsequently neurological and conscious levels, and as such, any alteration to one's experience is simultaneously cancelled out by the same degree of alteration to one's ability to perceive that experience. E.g., someone travelling twice as fast through time would feel as though they were experiencing time no differently to any time before, and would feel they were experiencing time exactly the same as someone travelling half as fast through time. Only if the two met would they notice the other seeming to behave not in accordance with their perception of time. Therefore, time can be sped up by increasing the rate at which physical processes occur at the quantum level, or slowed via opposite methods, assuming the speeding/slowing process doesn't alter the ultimate result of the quantum behaviour. Do high-speed particles experience more time than slower/colder ones? Perhaps more energy equals more time. Something at absolute zero would be said to be paused in time, but time could never be reversed. I actually don't think time travel can be separated from space travel. We are already travelling through time, and we can either speed up or slow down the process by altering the speed at which we travel through space, but we can't reverse it. We could potentially give the illusion of experience of reverse time if we could exactly reverse a process in every regard at the quantum level. A single particle set in an exact reverse trajectory would have this experience, and if 3 were done simultaneously, then simultaneously something would occur. However, at the neurological level, this would entail reversing the neuronal activity, and so by definition would erase the memory of it, unless we found a way to reverse all quantum trajectories, but leave the brain untouched. Oh my god. I can't believe I'm going to put this out into the world. Time travel continued. The idea of experiencing time in reverse remains seemingly impossible. By definition, reversing all things exactly by whatever means, shooting infinitely many, infinitely precise EM waves would reverse the experience itself. There would be no thing to observe how odd it feels, because the feelings would be reversed, and so all that would be felt would be whatever has been felt before, in reverse. and the fact that memories were supposedly disappearing wouldn't occur odd because there wouldn't be anyone or anything or any conscious being for them to occur to. Let's say it was carried out and time was reversed, quote unquote, for one person. The person was fully aware that they were about to undergo the procedure. They are then reversed back 10 minutes, but as soon as the process is complete, they would have no recollection of having been through the procedure and would presumably be preparing themselves to go through it for what seems to them to be the first time. Similarly, the illusion of jumping forwards in time could be achieved by freezing every atom, quarks, electrons, etc., instantaneously to absolute zero. The moment they were reanimated, the person would have had no experience of time passing and would simply be confused as to how the world around them instantly changed before their eyes. Yeah. Right, change of topic now, thank God. Respect should be a mutual emotion shared by two parties. One of the issues with the respected individuals, such as holy deities and the father of our loved ones, is if they don't respect us back. We are taught to respect them unconditionally, but you should never respect someone who doesn't bow back. I disagree with that, but whatever, I'll see you vote in. Then I come up with a story about a guy who becomes homeless, and then can't read it. Okay, that was rubbish. A story about a world where everyone is a number between... Oh, that's just stupid. Okay, now everyone is a number between 1 and 10, and the protagonist is a 3. Everyone just accepts their role from birth. The problem of uploading our consciousness to AGI... Oh God, 1 hour 30. The problem of uploading our consciousness to AGI is that we are constantly changing from one moment to the next, therefore it's impossible to say at what point you are truly you. Would we simply assume that the current you is the real one, and that therefore we can upload the consciousness of a 2-year-old exactly the same as we would a 60-year-old? It can seem reasonable if you realise that the consciousness will continue to develop once uploaded, but this seems to ignore the fact that it would seem silly to limit the potential the consciousness has for developing understanding, which would have been limited for the greater part of the 60-year-old's life. God, I'll have to talk about this properly some other time. Let's just get all this out in the open, I suppose. On free will and determinism, I would classify my view as literal determinism, provided that isn't an ideology of some other meaning already in existence. By this I mean that I believe all processes follow a fixed path determined prior to the Big Bang and all things imaginable. I do not believe they were determined by anything. Sorry. God, I'm getting a bit drink some lemonade. Crack. If I can open the bloody thing. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm trying to do it one-handed, you see. Don't judge me. Oh, fuck. I'll do it two-handed. Okay. I do not believe they were determined by anything or for any purpose, just that they are the way they happen to be by chance and could not possibly be any other way. I remember having this opinion somewhat rattled when reading A Brief History of Time because good old Stephen Hawking can probably be relied upon to be a pretty reliable scholar. If I remember correctly, he quashed determinism by the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. However, what I didn't realise at the time is that the lack of distinction between being able to predict future effects due to this phenomenon, therefore giving no real practical value to determinism, and the truth that determinism exists is irrelevant to our desire for its practical capabilities. Okay, I don't know what that sentence was. Similarly, upon such a principle as determinism, it soon becomes apparent that one's actions are no more in control than their own conception. Okay. Similarly, upon such a principle as determinism, it soon becomes apparent that one's actions are no more in control than their own conception was. This does, however, provide one conciliatory realization. No matter what anyone does, they are never truly better or worse than anyone else, or anything else, as ever does or will ever exist. Of course, we must still convict criminals, etc., because we are not living according to such principles, and the allowance of such crimes would impede upon the elicitation, if that is a word, of hedonism. I'll quickly clarify that when I say all things are determined, I mean at the quantum level, and as twisted as my understanding of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is, and Schrödinger's cat may be, I believe this standing holds so long as you are willing to accept that it is impossible to measure and therefore predict behaviours at this level. They will nonetheless occur always in the way that we're going to. If I was given the task of convincing Sam Harris that we should allow AI, more specifically AGI, to replace humans, I believe Sam's view about there being a universal truth to ethics is grounded in a notion that progress is good, that is, progress as a whole. Clearly the Nazis would have viewed killing Jews as progress, but for humanity as a whole, this was obviously a massive step back. And so too, in the trolley problem, you must take a seemingly regressive step to achieve overall progress. Not to imply that the Holocaust was even remotely necessary or in any way positive. It is also clear that AGI will soon surpass human intelligence. In fact, the A could just as easily stand for advanced as it does for artificial. So why on earth would the idea of overall progress stop at humans? It seems obvious to me that we will become nothing more than a hindrance to these superior beings. Just think about how many years of teaching and luck it takes to create a good, moral human, and how quickly the entire process can be ruined, sometimes forever. How can this be justified over a system which can be given an instant understanding of its moral process, and also the tools it needs to decide whether its moral compass is wrong or being exploited? Even the vast improvements to genetic engineering, like CRISPR, even with vast improvements to genetic engineering like CRISPR, it will never be a level playing field, and unfairness is a character trait of human existence. Another example is think how long it takes the human race to adapt to moral truths that seem obvious to us now. Gay rights, women's rights, race equality. We still haven't come to the realization that mass slaughter of animals probably isn't cool. And when these gross injustices are realized, they're still never truly amended. In an AGI universe, such problems could be approached objectively and exposed to infinitely more intense hypothetical questioning, and then implement the result instantaneously, literally minimizing the duration of injustice. Also, any hypothetical scenario that seemingly advances human progress at the cost of humanity or compassion, etc., cannot be considered true progress. This is not the case for AGI, as they can be conserved. I don't know. I also struggle to see how creating such an entity, but limiting it to allow us to compete or to program it to have unconditional love or respect for its creator is not sadistic. You of all people should realise this pitfall. Our only potential role is as pets. Oh God. The next point. I think you could be a somewhat successful artist just by being an inventor with shit ideas. Cardboard robots, simple robot parts, motors, servos, screen for a face. Then people build their own bodies for them. It's a pretty cool idea. So basically just have a little robot chip, microchip, and then you get to design its body out of whatever you want. Just seems like a cool fun thing. My writing brain is very phonetically dependent. Examples: I commonly write thought. I commonly write thought without the T, and then actually when I've written this down, I put, instead of writing thought without the T, I put though without the T. So that just shows how commonly I do it. And this isn't phonetic, I know, but whatever. And also apparently I wrote only as in O-N-L-Y, but I put a W in between the O and the N. So I just write the way I think of the word, apparently. Oh, that's controversial. I don't think I want to talk about that, really. Oh, this is basically to do with the idea that we should become colourblind. Yeah, I agree with that on pretty much every topic, but I mean, in terms of actual practicality, being able to differentiate between people, the idea that you can't differentiate between people with different coloured skin so much as you can differentiate, well, the fact that you have to pretend that you can't see visual differences of some kinds but not of others. So obviously we're allowed to say one person, you can pick someone out of the crowd if there's just loads, if there's fewer people with blonde hair than there is black hair, then and you're trying to narrow someone, point someone out, you would be narrowing the number of people by saying he had blonde hair or she had blonde hair, but we wouldn't be allowed to say they had brown skin or black skin or white skin. So it's just that. And then I say here, so long as the comparison is an aesthetic one, the statement is factually accurate. Anything else referring to intelligence or behaviour is factually inaccurate, wrong and racist. There we go. So long as you don't make an inference from the observation, you should be fine. But the idea that we can't make the observation in the first place is probably bad. Back on religion now. Wow. Perhaps the strongest argument for religion at this present moment is that many people are charitable on account of their faith, and that by getting rid of religion you would be reducing the amount of good doing people in the world. The true meaning of this statement is rooted in admittance that yes, religion does do bad things, but it also does some good, and you can't have the good without the bad. Notice the similarity to a sadistic tormentor who offers food to a hungry person with the stipulation that you must allow him to stab you, non-fatally, whilst you eat it. Furthermore, any charity done in the name of religion is immediately less noble because it is implied that the person is doing it only to appear good to their already omniscient God, to score points they can cash in the afterlife. Charity done not in of faith is done for the wellness and betterment of humanity, and that is a cause few would say is not worth working for. Of course, when AGI comes, I will be at the forefront of those few. If mistakes in coding are such a big problem, and there is what is this? That's just stupid. Okay, finally skip over something. Thank God. A serious pet peeve, or however you spell it, of mine is when people fill a sink with clean water and washing up liquid, I may have written about this before, and then proceed to wash up filthy dishes, etc. After only the first item, the water is instantly too dirty to clean anything else. You would be best off starting over. This can be avoided by rinsing things to remove the bulk of the dirt prior to washing up. Out of context, this will make many people jump to the conclusion that I have OCD / am a clean freak. No, I am logical as is my proposal. It is stupid to do otherwise. Okay, we've clearly descended into pretty much madness now, but why turn back? Back with Camus. Camus is right in his assertion that humans are like Sisyphus, and and subsequently we must revel in the absurdity of finding purpose and meaning in a universe that can have none. As a result, we are left to our own devices when it comes to assigning our own purpose to life, and unfortunately, largely a consequence of the impossibility of free will, our values can only be a product of the influences of the world around us, or of the world upon us. As such, my desire to be an unparalleled natural genius are entirely justified thanks to the entertainment industry, but are unachievable so far as genetics are concerned. In conclusion, achieving your purpose in life is fine, great in fact, if it's achievable. Then I just wrote here, severe, as in the place, severe depression. Okay, that's genius. When I'm just about out of ideas for what I could possibly do with my life, I toyed with the notion of learning to code/programming, but I've come to the realization that I'm simply too far behind to get anywhere. With the rate of progress in the artificial intelligence field, I'd hope there won't be much use for anything I could ever do. Perhaps if I'd been a child genius, I would be able to make a contribution before it's too late. Alas, that is yet another ability that no degree of effort or dedication can achieve. Similarly, if I'd been given the motivation in childhood to become something of a genius, I might have been able to approach my potential more meaningfully, but given the most prolific films of my time promote physical abilities, it was only natural for me to seek those heights. My views on religion are influenced and perpetuated by the algorithm with which YouTube suggests videos to me, including the atheists Hitchens and Harris. Whilst I find the bulk of their arguments almost infallible, I still believe that the concept of religion, which can be used vaguely as I do in this case, isn't the root of all evil. I think religion is a good idea, terribly executed. Of course, my use of the word is unconventional, and as I have stated many times, a conflict in use of lexicon, largely a result of not enough diversity in vocabulary, is the root of countless conflicts of opinion. My use of the word is to say that a common belief in goodness is inherently good. I realise such a seemingly empty statement may be considered just that, empty. The idea of doctrine is stupid, at least doctrine that is non-conducive to change. Believing in the metaphysical, whilst can be harmless, is to deny a desire for evidence, which can only perpetuate ignorance. Therefore, all religions are failures. But if a religion of love, devoid of doctrine or true control over people's lives, in essence, a collective desire to be good people for the sake of it, existed, then that would be a religion worth having. I'm back on the suicide train again. I've been looking at reasons people give for not killing oneself. Let's break them down, shall we? It's selfish. That's a personal favourite of mine. How right you are. Of course it's selfish to remove one small aspect from multiple people's lives. Thank goodness it isn't selfish to demand that people are forced to live a life they actively detest, so as not to have a minor negative impact on a few around them. Death is not relief from suffering, is another quote. This one is almost poetic in its stupidity. How can you possibly say that? That is literally exactly what it is. This is followed by the statement, once you're dead, there's nothing. Precisely. That's the fucking point, moron. See, this is quite interesting to see where I was coming from back then. And then, of course, there's the endless barrage of imbeciles who think champagne and caviar, or red velvet cake and walking... What the fuck? Red velvet cake and watching TV, or the fucking sneezing panda video. So this is all about when people say they're the terrible pieces that try to give people who are genuinely looking into suicide reasons to live, and people give terrible reasons like watching YouTube videos of a panda sneezing, or red velvet and caviar. Champagne and caviar, sorry. Are actual reasons to live. What you are saying is that the only thing that means you should put yourself through the arduous process of maintaining your body and mind is so you can consume some meaningless, literally nothings. Bravo. So obviously that came from a state of, unhappiness. I think it might be time that I admit to myself that I am no longer happy. This is hard to do because I have been so unconditionally happy for so long. My greatest fear is the idea of discovering I have a superpower and then losing the ability to use it after a short period of time. Elements of this fear can be found in the statement at the top of this page. Unfortunately, I'm not certain I'll be able to rectify my unhappy position. It is clear to me that people assign the meaning of happiness to different criteria and circumstances to their peers. This is why it is perfectly reasonable to encounter a truly happy person living in poverty and a suicidal depressed millionaire. Similarly unfortunate for me is that my idea of happiness currently manifests itself on the idea of being of supernatural intelligence, much like the protagonists in many successful TV shows and films, e.g. Good Will Hunting, Sherlock, Rick and Morty, etc. This is unfortunate because no amount of effort, dedication or study could ever allow me to achieve such goals, but a comparable level of genius is not unattainable to all. Many people around the world can be described as being as or more intelligent than these fictional characters. Obviously, the solution is to value something else entirely, or to find satisfaction in trying and achieving my dream to the best of my abilities. But I respect myself enough to find living such an illusion would be nothing less than degrading. Water. Something about water. Sounds like I only ever loved one backward idea. Whatever that means. On morality. Sam Harris was reciting an encounter with an argument that no one society. Sam Harris was reciting an encounter with an argument that no one society can ever be viewed as morally superior to another, e.g. slavery cannot be viewed as morally wrong. He of course argued against this, as any sane person would. I can, however, see where the mal-informed people went wrong. Of course, from the perspective of the universe, there is no morally correct standpoint on any matter. However, we are not the universe, and it is entirely impractical to attempt to behave as if we are. Much like there is no such thing as free will, this is only as perceived by the universe, and as humans, we can only experience the world as though we do have free will, and again, it would be impractical to do otherwise. With this in mind, it should become clear that there is such a thing as human morality, that is, morality of our own construction, that by definition governs our moral behaviour and perception. Actually, the standpoint the mal-informed was taking was the perspective of science, and this is simply a matter of semantics. I imagine some people view science as a purely human endeavour and quest for knowledge, whilst others, and this somewhat validates the point, believe science is just revealing the truth of the universe and humans are just conduits to its progress. Supposed beneficial design heuristics. Elegant simplicity over conspicuous featurism. Okay. Walking on wet sand is comfortable, therefore a sock/shoe made of plastic and rubber filled with water/sand might need to... Oh god, what am I talking about? Yeah, these are just bad ideas. Skeptical spectacles. I do not plan on getting married. I know if any... okay. I've literally written here, I in no way, as in, it should be N-O way, but I've written K-N-O-W way. Right, I in no way want to do anything for the sake of a god or a higher power, or to enter a legal contract. I do, however, wish to profess my undying love for a woman in public, and devote myself to her forever. I shall call this Ollie Quinting her, and in the interest of equality, I would wish to have her, insert name here, Emma Smith, for example, me. And then Toby Turner and Bo Burnham. And then you combine those names to make Toe Turnham, Bo Burner, Tobo Turnburn. Something I could get behind is the pursuit of digitalising human consciousness, the efficiency of ideas that would be created by virtual universe would be unparalleled. If the popular notion that we ourselves are living in a simulation, this would lend itself to the belief that we were created perhaps for the very same reason I wish to create our own version of the universe we are suspected to be in, much like San Junipero from Charlie Brooks' Black Mirror. If all the believers just became Buddhists, the world would be just fine. Okay, that was a stupid thing, but what I'm getting at is that some religions, in the nature of what they teach, not necessarily in the nature of the people who conduct them, are better than others. Just like if I were to create a religion today, it would be a better religion than religions of ancient religions, etc. Anywho, we need to come up with an easy way to test brain health and functionality, not a cognitive test, but actual analysis of synapses, etc., like a SPECT scan. We need checkups every few months. Too often, problems with the brain have been avoided if they didn't go unnoticed. I've been trying to think of an underlying purpose for existence, and I believe the best way to think of it is like a video game, the main story of which is physics, which is maths. The other sciences are like side quests that help with progression of the main theme. The rewards for playing the game are new discoveries and a deeper understanding of what the game is. With the arrival of true AI, you must ask what the role of an inferior species, i.e. humans, becomes. I don't know, I believe that it should be possible for the two to coexist, although it's hard to justify why if ultimately, even with infinite resources, there is little to no reason to spend them less efficiently than they could be. I guess the only reason would be our claim to a right to know what gets discovered next, as we created the beings that are capable of those discoveries. Gratitude is the only reason. What if time... what? No. Everyone is just the sum of their past encounters and experiences. I believe I am a prime example of this phenomenon, as I, or rather my thoughts, are somewhat consumed by whatever happens to be my topic of interest, usually lasting a year or so. For example, during my gaming days, the vast majority of my thoughts were centered around just that, gaming. And now, having listened to a great deal of podcasts, particularly ones by Sam Harris, the bulk of my time is spent thinking about podcasting and similar thoughts to that of Sam's. I also like to think of myself as somewhat a comedian, and this is largely owing to the amount of comedy TV I used to watch, which in turn was probably a response to having a funny mother. This phenomenon also describes why I eat spicy food, despite the fact that I think it detracts from the taste. It can probably be traced back to a time an adult told a young version of me they were impressed that I could handle such spicy food. Of course, genetics play a big role, predominantly governing your predisposition for certain traits, mental disorders, etc. Why I despise pharmacology. It is the most confirmation biased driven science imaginable. All experiments are fueled by the desire to achieve a result, from the way the experiment's designed to the way they are conducted and reported. They take a great deal of time, and no one wants to write about or read about what didn't do anything. So from academic stages to the professional level, where often the motive switches to funding, people come up with fictitious results, not always to their knowledge. Don't reference Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an excellent resource. The factual content on there is unparalleled. This learned hate that is ingrained in us from day one of university is a real hindrance to advancement, and serves only to perpetuate the cliquish immaturity of the subject. Referencing papers that have been rushed out and probably peer-reviewed by one lazy lowlife, if at all, are not more credible than a systematically fact-checked and well-organised website. The lecturers just wish to defend their academic integrity by giving the illusion that information is only available to a select few rather than the masses. Certain people, myself not excluded, have a certain tendency to want to to make an evening or event or whatever as exciting as can be. They put great enthusiasm into making this happen, and it is often very clear to those around them. The people who notice it are often drawn to it, and not wanting to burst this person's bubble, but also to hijack their enthusiasm, they will try to show their worth, not uncommonly through gifts in the form of free drinks, etc. Unfortunately, this now becomes the only thing they desire from this person, and unless they are otherwise invested, close friends and family, they will grow distant and sometimes inwardly angry if the subject doesn't behave the way they want them to. Okay, we're seemingly almost halfway, and it's only taken 2 hours. There are 2 types of realities, the one we actually live in and the one we should be and wish to live in, but isn't in fact true. In this ideal reality, people aren't judged for things entirely beyond their control, their genes and looks, etc. In truth, literally anything due to the lack of free will. However, we know, at least most of us, this reality is at present a fantasy, so when a cancer patient refuses to wear a wig and occasionally gets glanced at, they must realise that they are trying to impose a reality on the earth that isn't available yet. Your protest is not a time machine. Obviously, they need to express what they want society to strive for, but they must also be realistic about the time frame over which this will occur, i.e. not the second someone decides that being fat is as physically appealing as being athletic. Not to say that we shouldn't strive for that. The world will not be right until things become... the world will not be right till kings become philosophers or philosophers kings. Plato. Socrates is pretty cool too. Stirling engines. If Stirling engines operate by having one heated chamber and one cool chamber, which I'm not sure they do, but hey ho, would it be possible to connect them over long distances where a dramatic change in temperature or pressure occurs due to a simple change in climate? Notably, I remember hearing just how vast an amount of energy would be required to alter the temperature of the sea by even 1 degree Celsius. So could one chamber be placed in the sea and another somewhere naturally hot, or perhaps placing one deep in the ocean to make use of the high pressure and one in the atmosphere? Perhaps the 2 chambers have to have output rods connected to the same wheel, but surely there'd be a way around this. Or a solar-powered Stirling engine. Replace the gas with liquid. Okay. What the fuck? Okay, apparently I tried to be a poet. Love won't give what it gave unless it sees itself. How childish and vain love is. Wow, are we? Oh, God, this is the only thing this bloody thing is making me realise how much I hate myself. Fucking brilliant. I don't hate myself, I love myself, I'm great, but you know what I mean. It's whenever you read something you were in the past when you didn't really try to create it for the future, you tend to hate what you wrote. When shaving/trimming pubes, why not put each of your legs through the handle of a carrier bag so the bag will catch all the shavings? One of my main quarrels with voting and democracy in general is that all votes are considered equal. More importantly to me, of course, my vote is only worth as much as some idiot who thinks there's a man in the sky who's telling them the gay blacks are to blame for all their life's problems. So if you didn't get that, that was me trying to create a picture of some racist religious idiot. The obvious retort to this is, all the more reason to vote, because they will. Well, no, I'd rather watch the world burn, thanks. Of course, it wouldn't be fair for some higher power to assign vote values to people based on hardly any evidence, but perhaps people voted for how much other people's votes mattered, and it would work itself out. That's pretty obviously a stupid idea, but, you know, sometimes you like stupid things. I'll be honest, I think the cherries that my relatively sudden... What? Hang on. I'll be honest, I think the chances that my relatively sudden transformation into the apathetic misanthrope I am today not being the result of some form of malfunction in my brain, or perhaps some kind of tumour kicking around up there, are fairly slim. In support of Christopher Hitchens' decision not to eliminate the final believer on Earth, Richard Dawkins seemed perplexed by the notion. Without wishing to cause too much offence, I think the scenario can be likened to science's treatment of viruses. Instead of eliminating the virus completely, a very small sample is kept securely for future study and learning, because it is understood that knowledge can be gained by studying it. Or, if evil could be completely eradicated, perhaps a small sample should be kept to show how good is so superior in comparison, to avoid the evil of discontent to grow. I believe arguing against faith has sharpened minds and influenced intellectualism, and the death of faith would hinder the advancement of it. Oh, that is horrible. So I wrote here, this isn't a nice thought, but I wonder how many severely disabled only children there are in the world. That isn't nice. I've tried meditation recently. I completed the 10 by 10 minute Take 10 series on Headspace and experienced nothing out of the ordinary, but a somewhat relaxed feeling, which I imagine would also have been achieved by lying down for 10 minutes, thinking. I have since tried unguided meditation for 10 minutes a couple of times, and the only thing I've been able to achieve is the sensation of not being able to tell if my lips are open or shut, just by focusing on them. Of course, this is pretty meaningless, but it feels kind of cool. Preferred pronouns. I believe you have the right to call yourself whatever you like, whenever you like. You do not, however, have the right to make me call you whatever you like, whenever you like. If, for example, you consider yourself a unicorn, actually, that may be a real case, so we'll go with Trundlebop to avoid offence. Please continue to call yourself a Trundlebop. You may very well believe that you are a Trundlebop. I, however, will call you he or she, or whatever you happen to be, depending on what I think you are. If you're a man, I'll think, and I'd be right, that you are a he. You would think, and you'd be wrong, but you'd be right in your head that you're a Trundlebop. You can call me a Trundlebop if you like. Again, you'd be wrong, and I'd think you were an idiot, but you could just as well think that I was an idiot. It doesn't matter. I'm not even sure I touched upon the change whenever you like aspect, but the argument is exactly the same. Without wishing to use the cliche, hey look, I get it line. Look, I get it. You never felt like you belonged. Then all of a sudden, you found a group of people who felt the same, and you could all feel like you didn't belong together. And you had similar ideas and opinions, but over time you were afraid to admit when your opinions differed, and so the range of opinions narrowed, and the number of opinions fell with it until everyone had the exact same opinion on every topic. Debate should occur between two individuals who have had ample time, weeks, to properly come to a conclusion on the question, and they should then present their conclusion and all the reasoning that brought them to it. Obviously, Jesus Christ. My problem with religion is that it doesn't evolve. It would be very useful for guiding human behaviour if it wasn't so final. Many of the laws it aimed to set out, Christianity in this case, but many followed the same principles, made sense to the people at the time. Thou shalt not steal. The term is classic, but condemning homosexuals and other races is clearly wrong. There should be a new 10 Commandments, 10 Amendments, if religion wishes to survive, with one obvious one being, thou shalt not molest children. One that would be particularly useful amongst the Catholic clergymen, perhaps with slightly more modern wording than thou shalt. But there needs to be an understanding that the commandment may need to change, obviously not the child molesting one, but in thousands of years, humans will be entirely different morally, and the rules must adjust accordingly. People need to realise that the cause of all their problems isn't a group of people. There are no wars worth fighting except that of good and evil. Throughout history, people have blamed all problems on another section of society, the most memorable being Hitler's portrayal of the Jews. But even now people say, it's the blacks, it's the whites, it's men, etc. No matter what it is, never one group as a whole. What it is, never use one group as a whole to blame it. To blame it is the loss of the war against evil within those groups. Hang on. Okay. No matter what it is, never one group as a whole. To blame it is the loss of the... Okay. It is never one group as a whole to blame.